Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to do several little odd jobs here in the garden as we get closer and closer to springtime. This week is most of the days are in the 70s. In fact, it's supposed to be 80 today as I'm filming this on a Wednesday morning. And so the garden's really going to wake up very quickly now. The soil temperature is going to rapidly come up. And so I went ahead and fertilized this morning, and I used plant tone out here. Most of the plants out here in this garden are acid-loving plants. This azalea, this tree-formed azalea in front of me would be a great example of that. And you will see fertilizers out on the market that say azalea, camellia, rhododendron fertilizer, or holly tone, or something with the name holly in it. And those are for acid-loving plants. But if your soil pH is already low and you have plenty of iron if you have plenty of iron available, so if you got a soil test done and your pH was below 6.5, let's say, and you have iron, you have adequate iron in the soil, you don't need to add anything to the soil to change it or add additional iron or sulfur or anything. Okay, so if your pH was higher than that and you were trying to grow some of these plants for acid-loving plants, then you could use holly tone, but you don't need it. Again, if your soil pH is already low. I did a video years ago called why soil pH is so important, and I did it at my garden center. It's probably not the greatest video I ever made, but I think it's probably the most information you could get from a single video in the 1,700 videos on this channel. Probably you could probably learn the most about why soil pH is so important. It's actually, your soil pH kind of determines nutrient uptake. What nutrients are available to plants. So the lower your pH goes, the more iron is available. The lower your pH goes, though, the less phosphorus is available. So it's like it's a give and take. But somewhere around 6.5 is kind of the sweet spot. That's what you'll get from watching that video. If you're 6.5 or lower, I just use plant tone. If it's higher than that and you're trying to grow some of these acid-loving plants, switch over to holly tone or some other organic fertilizer for acid-loving plants. I got video every single year for fertilizing out here in the garden, and I'm not going to do one specific for this year outside of the one you're watching right now. If you want to go back and watch any of those, I talk about why using organic fertilizer makes sense over synthetic fertilizers. Okay, what we're trying to do is feed this soil. And I do, doing some public speaking this spring about called soil first gardening, and basically I'm trying to take care of this soil, and I'm allowing this soil to take care of these plants, which is the way nature kind of does it. Nobody's out in the woods taking care of the trees in the woods, right? Nobody's out in the grassy prairies taking care of the grass, right? They're able to do it on their own they take care of the soil. So that's what we need to do, I think, more in our home gardens. And so you'll get something out. Go back and watch one of those videos. I go into more detail about that. But I went through and put out a 50-pound bag on this back garden, and I think the recommendation, if you're fertilizing for new beds, I think it's 10 pounds per 100 square feet, and for established beds, it's like 5 pounds per 100 square feet. I'm definitely under that. I'm definitely not up to that 5 pounds per 100 square feet. I'm probably more like, if we took the square footage of this back garden back here, I'm probably somewhere around 2.5, 3 pounds per 100 square feet. So I'm about half of what the recommendation on the bag is. We've done a lot of composting, a lot of wood chips, a lot of hardwood mulch out here. We've done a lot to improve this soil, so I just don't think I need that much fertilizer. I'm going to get another bag for the front garden. So this is actually a little more than I've put out in the last few years, but part of that is because we've gained some additional space out here. We took out what was going to be a greenhouse in the back corner back there. We've kind of gotten the garden out to all 4 corners now, and so I'm fertilizing a little more space, but I don't think I'm using any more fertilizer than I was before. So a few things, I sling it out over the top. The instructions you may go plant to plant if you want to. I don't pull any mulch back. I don't want to disturb my mulch barrier and have, I think I'll pay the price in additional weeds by disturbing the soil a lot. I'll pay a heavier price there than I will gain from having the fertilizer in contact with the soil and under the mulch. If you were going to mulch this spring, then definitely do the fertilizing and then put the mulch cap over the top of it. Few other things. I take a broom after I've slung this fertilizer out. Now what I did was I slung fertilizer everywhere, and then I had about this much left, and so then I walked back around and I did it again until it was gone. I tried to get it as even as possible, but it's not perfectly even. I'm not that worried about it. But then I took a broom and just went over the top just gently with a broom. You can do this with a rake or anything you want to. Don't tear your plants up, don't damage them, but I try to knock that fertilizer off the leaves as much as possible and down to the ground where it belongs. The dogs absolutely love this fertilizer. They're fascinated with it. They'd love to roll in it all day long. And I need to water it. And typically what I would try to do in the spring is time our fertilizing out here to rain. So I'd love to put it out and have it rain this afternoon. But rain has just been hit or miss this entire spring so far, where we've had no prediction of rain. Our best rains this spring, or this I don't want to say spring because it's not quite spring, but in the last month were a couple that weren't predicted and a couple that were predicted were just bust. I'm not going to wait for the rain. We put the fertilizer out, I knocked it off the foliage, and now we're watering. I don't think I've ever broken out the watering in the March, except for maybe watering some individual plants that I was planting. But I don't think I've ever generally watered the garden. And so I'm trying to get this fertilizer just basically melted down in the ground so we can let the dogs back out here and get it working. So that's the method to the madness. I sling it out by hand. You saw I was in a mask because it's dusty when you're slinging it like I was. Wear old clothes, you're gonna smell a little funky when you're done with that job, but it's pretty quick and easy. This is my method. It's not everybody's method, but I like to get the job done, get it out, knock it off the plants, water it if needed, and move on with my day. And we're good to go. We won't fertilize anything else in this garden the rest of the season, except for some annual flowers. Vegetable garden may get refertilized. Containers, as we're planting containers in the spring, we'll get some fertilizer, but that's it. Beyond that, the leaves that are in this garden, the mulch that's in this garden, that's what's in the material that I'm cutting off these plants and recycling back into the garden, that's what's feeding it. Okay, that's fertilizer. Got a few things. I'm at the point now where I'm going to go ahead and start pruning off some of the damaged material here in the garden. This is a Fat's Hedra, which is a combo platter between Fatsia and ivy. It's a non-aggressive ivy. It doesn't root into anything, and it's pretty tame plant. It's marginal in our area, and the way this thing went to sleep this year was that it was wide awake. It was absolutely wide awake in November, and then got slammed with 16-degree night, and so it burned back the late growth that was on it. It didn't really hit anything in the old growth, and even this is alive. I can see now how far back this thing's actually dead. So I can start cutting here, and I can figure out pretty quick, that's dead. I can even hear it when it cuts. That's dead, and I can see it down here on the stem, how far back this goes. And so I'm gonna go just beyond that and right to a bud on the edge of the stem. So right there, I can see where this thing will branch. It's willing to branch right there. So I'm gonna cut just above it, and we're gonna get growth from there. I'm going to put this up on the wall eventually here, and I've already staked it to the wall down here, but I'm gonna take the weight off above this, and then the growth that I'm getting this year, I'm gonna go ahead and attach it. So we're gonna start getting this thing to grow up the side of the house a bit more. But again, any of these places where I can see the bud on the side of the stem, I'm gonna cut just above that and go ahead and take this damaged part off. I can sit here right now and just go ahead and cut this into bits and throw it down here at the bottom. It's not diseased, it's winter damaged. So it's not gonna hurt the plant to just go right down at the base of this plant, or I could find another plant to throw it under if I wanted to, or it can go in a compost bin or whatever the heck you wanna do with it. But here, I'm in a little cluttered area right here where I just don't care if this stuff goes right down to the ground and it just disappear under the plant, and it can just feed itself during the season. I've got a David viburnum that's planted over there is over here. So while I'm in here, I'll, if there's something else I see, an invasive weed or a shrub that's trying to colonize or something like that, I'll go ahead and take care of that at the same time. But I'm gonna go through on a few shrubs that I can now tell how far back they've actually died, and just go ahead and get them cleaned up some. Just feel like it's time, because this stuff is going to start growing pretty daggone quickly. If there's broken branches, this one's got a couple broken branches on it. I'll just go ahead and cut those completely out of there. Throwing it on top of stuff here. Some of this bigger material I'll just take and compost it. We have everything in this garden planted pretty tight, so things are pretty close together, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm allowing the foliage just to pile up on top of itself down in the bottom of the plant. If there's anything that's kind of crawling across the ground underneath this thing, I'd actually like to get some air movement under it. I don't want a place for snails and slugs and all these hiding things to be able to hide out here under a big giant pile of a viney plant like this. That'd be the perfect place for those kinds of things to hide. So any branch that's actually just crawling across the ground, I'm gonna cut that back, and I'm trying to ultimately lift this thing up onto the wall. This pomegranate took it particularly hard. Sometimes they can be early to wake up and get damaged, and other times they can be late to go to sleep, and that's what happened with this pomegranate here. It is, I can now see, because the color change is happening in the stem, it's like black up here at the top, and it's alive down here, and I can actually use my thumbnail. Steph, come right in here. Let's see. If I use you can see right here, I think, the color change, and the bark is coming off of it right there. I think you guys can see that. The bark is coming off that stem right there. Okay, so that's definitely dead. But if I get down here, I can see the color change in the stem, and if I scratch that with my thumb, I think maybe you can see that's green. Right there, you see that? So I know it's alive right there, and then I can see the bark peeling off right there. So I can come in here and go ahead and clean this up if I want to before it starts to leaf out. Or I could wait for the buds to start to swell on it and see where they're gonna definitely come out and cut it at that time. Totally up to you on how you do that. But what I wanted to point out was, this is my regular bypass pruners. And by bypass, I mean, you have this back plate here, and the blade bypasses that. Okay, it goes past that point. Okay, if you have dead branches, these anvil pruners, which I don't think everybody knows quite what they're for, they do a really good job of cutting. An anvil pruner just basically pinches the branch on the back plate right there and cuts it. Okay, you'll find if even over there on that Fats hedra, a couple of those absolutely dead branches, when I cut it with this, it actually takes a little bit of effort. It's weird how easily this will cut through living material and how hard it is to cut using this on dead material. So if you have a set of anvil pruners, when it's time to start pruning dead branches out of things, you'll know what they're used for, because these make very quick work of any branch that's dead like that. It does a good job of cutting them off clean. And I'm just going to go through and where that color change is on the stem is where I'm going to cut these back to, and I'm pretty confident that that's all the cutting I'll need to actually do on this season. But I can see just where the bark is peeling off of it. Lucky probably that it didn't go colder, than it did in that initial freeze, because the thing was completely and totally awake. Even beyond that freeze, it still had leaves on it for a little while, and then it started to crack open. I was actually kind of fearful that it may have killed it completely, but it has not at all. And now I've got it pretty cleaned up here. If I want to go through and get some of these old leaves off of it, I can at this time. But I think this thing it'll come right back out from that, and it's good to go. We've done a lot of cleanup here in the garden, but I'm still finding, like this October Magic Ruby Camellia has just absolutely full of leaves here. I'm gonna go ahead and knock some of these out. I don't need anything perfect. It just doesn't bother me all that much, but this is a lot of leaves for sure. So I'm gonna just clean it up. And if we've got any kind of runaway stems like this one, October Magic Ruby tends to grow flat, and it'll layer on itself and get taller in time. And I do actually want it to get taller, but any of these really vertical stems that are coming up, I'll chase those kind of down in the plant. And I want to keep a natural look to this thing, but I don't really want these super vertical limbs coming up on it. I'm not trying to add the growth that quickly. Just really trying to keep it a look where it's just layering on itself. Is that about all of them, Steph? Okay, all right. All right, just like that, I've gotten it back into this flat kind of look, and now I can get a few more of these leaves out of here, which I'm just knocking down to the ground. I'm not worried about them. But there you go. It's about to start putting on its spring growth right now. I can see the buds swelling on it. It won't be long before, you know, it has all that fresh new growth on it. So I want to get this pruning done before then. Over on the weekly garden planner, if you were wondering when to prune a camellia, you know, on the weekly garden planner, I've got a list of when to prune, you know, each shrub. So this is a shrub that bloomed in the fall, right up until around Christmas, maybe carried a few flowers beyond that, depending on how cold it got. And then you prune it late winter, early spring, as it's right before it's starting to put on this new growth. I'm hoping to put the right camellia in the right spot, okay? Because this camellia is kind of the perfect one to go in front of a window, because it can be layered like this. It has that layered look to it. We have other camellias that grow big and tall, that can get 15, 18 feet tall, that wouldn't be the appropriate camellia for this. And then I'd have to be doing some kind of wacky pruning on it, right, to keep it under this window in the future. But right plant, right place. And then there's only 6 limbs to cut off of it. And I fertilized it and I knocked a few leaves out of it. And I've literally done the maintenance I'm gonna do on this October Magic Ruby Camellia for the year. We gotta get at least one plant in the ground in one of these videos. Pretty excited to get this gardenia in the ground. It's actually been in our vegetable garden back here. We overwintered some things that we had in containers. We were gonna be out of town some, and I'm glad that we didn't have anything out here in containers while we were gone in November, because it, you know, went from 60-degree nights to 16-degree night really quickly, and anything that we had in containers would have probably been damaged. So we went through the process of just putting the things in the vegetable garden because we weren't using it, and it's overwintered things beautifully, and now we're transplanting them back out into the garden as we're prepping the vegetable garden for vegetables. So strategy that maybe you guys can implement in your own garden to overwinter some things, because the roots are better off in the ground than they are above ground in a container for sure. This gardenia is pretty exciting. We got this at the Putnam garden when we visited, and I don't remember, that video would have been, was that August? I think it was August when we were going through the Norfolk area. We went to the Norfolk Botanic Garden, and we went to the, it was raining that day at the Norfolk Botanic Garden, super, super heavy. But that, and then we went over to the Putnam garden, and we want to go back there and tour some. But as gardeners do, we got a parting gift when we left, and it was this beautiful variegated gardenia, which did amazing in the vegetable garden over the winter. When you get some of these larger leaf gardenias, can be a little less cold hardy overall in our area. The ones that tend to be more cold hardy, you'll notice kind of a pattern in them. The climbs hardy and frost proof and others, they do have smaller foliage. The bigger leaf foliage ones tend to be slightly less cold hardy for whatever reason, and that was always the issue in growing some of the more tropical like ones at my nursery as well. But this one just held up incredibly well. And then of course when you add variegation to that, typically you lose a little bit of cold hardiness, but this thing held up incredibly well in the garden. I really thought that it was going to get damaged, and it did not at all. So this was a gift from them, and this one's called Ogon no Hana is the Japanese name for this one. I believe Ted Stevens is the person who brought this one back. I think it's going by a trademark name in the States, but it has big double white flowers on it, super fragrant, obviously. It's an upright grower, and I can already tell it's going to get some size on it in the future, so maybe in 10 years this won't be the spot for it, but its variegation will keep the growth a little slower. I saw it's like 2 to 3 feet on one website, but I guarantee, I mean, I can look at this thing and see it's going to be, you know, slightly more upright in time. Ogon means golden in Japanese, so we planted that Ogon spirea, I think in the last video, and it's a gold foliage spirea, and then we get the gold foliage on the, so if you see that word, that's typically what it means. It's going to mean gold or golden on the plant that you're purchasing. And I think we got a good spot for it here. This is a spot we needed to add some evergreen things to. It's just a big open space out here. We'll have some annual color out here and some perennials out here that are coming back, but it was really too empty during this winter, so we knew we were going to fill in a few things over here. So got a plant in the ground, got some pruning done, got fertilizer out in the back garden, still need to fertilize out here in the front garden. Let us know down below what you have going on in your garden, and thanks for following along.